Lolly ho and greetings, weary travelers. Today, I want to talk to you about the jobs in Final Fantasy XIV that I don't just want, but I think we need. Now, I want to say I've played a lot of Final Fantasy games. Final Fantasy IX is my absolute favorite, with Final Fantasy XII being a close second because it was my first ever Final Fantasy game. I also want to mention I have given Final Fantasy Brave Exvius a stupid amount of money over the past 4 years, so some of the jobs I'm about to say were influenced by both Final Fantasy lore and also my experience with other MMOs such as World of Warcraft. This will be in order and actually have one for every role except tank because I think for now we are good with 4. Now, that isn't to say I don't want any tanks in the future, I just don't know what job would best fit a tank role in Final Fantasy XIV, and also, in the next expansion, it isn't really a big priority in my mind. If it were up to me, I'd make lore to give us a Guardian Druid from World of Warcraft style tank, where we can shapeshift into a large monster to become a tank, but that's another video. And today, we're talking about the jobs we could see in 6.0, so let's go. Now, this is a job many of you might not know about, because it comes from Final Fantasy Brave Exvius with my best girl, Olive. In fact, if you didn't play Final Fantasy Brave Exvius when Olive was released, you might still be confused where the job title comes from, because Final Fantasy Brave Exvius used to have jobs for every character before they removed that feature, mainly because some of the characters were getting kind of weird job titles, such as Iris, just her job title was Noctis's friend. So, how does a Cannoneer play? Imagine a very tiny potato Lalafell carrying a cannon much bigger than they are on their shoulder, where they can use their ether to shoot out explosions one after another. This would basically be the Black Mage of physical ranged DPS. In fact, if you've played League of Legends, try to think of Tristana from the game, because that's pretty darn close to how a Cannoneer would play. You'd have the ability to use AoE mortar attacks, deal tons of explosions, and maybe give them the penetrating shot ability, allowing their team to do a little more damage because they exploded that guy so hard. Maybe for movement, they could shoot in a direction, and the recoil would be so powerful it sends them flying backwards. They also would have access to a variety of grenades with different utility that they can use when they need to be mobile. So this is a more of a real personal one for me that I want in Final Fantasy XIV, and I hope bringing it to you guys makes you kind of interested as well. When we all saw Blue Mage, we were all insanely excited for the concept, the pure idea of using the enemy's abilities as our own. However, Square decided to take us on a very interesting journey, basically making Blue Mage a whole minigame in its own. What I would love is for Square to give us the ability to max out the Blue Mage, but have one spellbook for regular Blue Mage gameplay, and the other that we have been building already. Some of my favorite characters have always been the Blue Mages, whether it was Quina or Kimahri, so I just really want to be able to play one in a max level environment. I want to build up a combo that changes my 1,000 needles to 10,000 needles to 100,000 needles, and have all these different mechanics of fire breathing and using water and just interplay between all the Blue Mage powers to create some really cool, fun things. I've always been a huge Blue Mage lover, and I'm sure we could add some really insane, awesome other ranged roles for Magic, but this is just what I would go with if I was given the reins. Now, there aren't that many green mages in Final Fantasy games, but they do exist, and I do believe we could have both the green mage for healing and the time battle mage for DPS. They do share some crossover, but if we use both Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy Brave Exvius as a guidepost, we can easily see the end game difference. So, if we look at green magic in Final Fantasy, much of it deals with buffs, debuffs, and elemental protection. So what I propose is that we have the green mage be more of a resistance healer, where if they know the fight and know the elemental damage of an attack, they can cast spells to protect against those attacks, all while using strictly heal over time abilities. I like to imagine it like a druid in World of Warcraft, how they are the master of heal over times, while also being able to buff a party from some elemental fire resistance and having a large cooldown to increase that resistance by a lot. Really, this is just a personal preference of what I want as our next healer, but any healer is absolutely a must in the next expansion to me. I do think that having a more diverse support healer pool always makes a game better. I don't care if it's a chemist, a sage, or a green mage. I think the game needs a fourth healer. So, what job do I think this game needs the most? Personally, I think some of you might disagree at first with what I'm about to say, but please let me explain. Now, I hear many of you saying, whoa, we've already got 4 melee, everything else needs to catch up first, and you're kind of right. But the fact that we don't have this type of melee DPS in the game is astounding to me, as it is the most classic fantasy playstyle ever, and Final Fantasy only has it in tank form. What am I talking about? The dude with the huge weapon smashing things like crazy. You can punch things with your fist, you can slice things with your katana or a dagger, you can even stab into them or crash into them with the big spear, but the fact that we don't have a DPS that's let you smash your foes with the biggest hunk of weapon you could find is outrageous to me. So, bring in Ffxiv from Final Fantasy XII, a DPS that wields a giant hammer, much like Gaia's, and deals damage by smacking the hell out of their enemies and applying debuffs with their hits. Imagine all the hype of being a warrior tank with none of the responsibility, which I'm sure many more warriors out there would actually love. When I got into Final Fantasy XIV, I was first looking for the big weapon monster DPS, and I know others who were, so this was such a shock to me that we didn't have one outside of being a tank such as a warrior or a dark knight. So maybe we have more melee than healers, ranged magic, but the fact that we don't have the big, dumb, smash melee DPS is a crime to me, and I think we need to fix that as soon as possible in 6.0. Well, those are the 4 jobs I believe we need in Final Fantasy XIV, everyone. Tell me, what jobs do you want? Have I convinced you that we need one of these jobs, or are you firmly waiting for your necromancer or apothecary that we've had teased to us in the recent patch? I'd be extremely happy with either, but I'm still gonna pray for Ffxiv for as long as I can. I am still working on my next WoW vs Final Fantasy XIV episode with the tanks, but if you haven't seen my Final Fantasy vs WoW races for character creation video, check that out in the comments section below. Thank you all so much for watching. I love you very much, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.